And God stepped out of space and he looked around and said, I grew. How big you would. Or as the eye applied to see darkness over everything, brighter than 100 midnights, down and sightless. Then God smiled, and the light broke. And the darkness rolled up on one side, and the light stood shining on the other, and God said, that's good. Then God reached out and took the light in his hand, and God rolled the light around with his hand until he made the sun. And he set that sun ablaze in the heaven. The light that was left from making the sun, God gathering up a shining ball and locked it against the dark, banging in the night, the moon and stars. Then down between the darkness and the light, he heard the word. God said, that's good. Then God himself stepped down. The sun was on his right hand and the moon was on his left. The stars clustered around his head, and the earth was under his feet. And God walked, and where he trod, his footsteps followed the valley back and bulged the mountains up. Then he stopped and looked and saw the earth was hot and barren. So God stepped over to the edge of the world and he spat out the seventh sea. He batted his eyes and the lightning flashed. He stopped his ass and the thunders rolled, and the waters above the earth came down. The cooling water came down. Then, with weary blasts struck, the little wish rustlings, forward blossomed, the pine trees flooded instantly to the sky. Books spread out his lawn. The lakes bubbled down in the hollows of the ground. The rivers ran down to the sea. God smiled again. The rainbow here curled and simple and overshadowed. Then God raised his arm and he waved his hand over the sea and over the land and said, bring forth, bring forth. And twinkling the night and dropped his hand. Fishes and fowls and beasts and birds swam the rivers of the sea, roamed the forests and the woods, and split the air with their wings. God said, that's good. Then God walked around, and God looked around on all that he had made. He looked at his sun, and he looked at his moon, looked at his little stars. He looked on his world with all its living things. And God said, I'm lonely still. Then God sat down. On the side of the hill, he could think. By a deep, wide river, he sat down. With his head in his hands, God thought and thought till he thought, I'll make me a man. Up from the bed of the river, God scooped the clay, and by the bank of the river, he kneeled him down. And there, the great God Almighty, who lit the sun and fixed it in the sky, who flung the stars to the most far corner of the night, who rounded the earth in the middle of his hand, the great God, like a mammy bending over her baby, kneeled down in the dust, toiling over a lump of clay, till he shaped it in his own image. Then into it, he blew the breath of life, and man became a living soul. Amen. Amen.
You know, I'll say after that, I just wanted to go home because I didn't follow that. Thank you, Reverend Thompson, for that stirring opening and for your tremendous leadership in our community. And of course, as the founding board president of the Black Heritage Trail of New Hampshire. Thank you so much. Good afternoon. My name is Gene Martin, and I have the privilege of serving as the 5th board president of the Black Heritage Trail of New Hampshire. On behalf of the board of directors, I want to thank you for joining us in person and for those who are joining virtually on Zoom. As a reminder, this Tea Talk is being recorded. I want to thank the trail's dedicated volunteers, particularly Shelley. I'll tell you, if we leave and there's food left, so I sort of want to heed that warning from her. And I also want to thank our incredibly hardworking staff of the Black Heritage Trail. If we could all give them a round. In continuing on with the gratitude, I wanted to recognize a few folks who have joined every single Tea Talk, whether in person or online, for as long as we've been doing them. So I want to recognize Betty Lane, Barbara Newton, Lester, and Joe Ellen Cuff.
Are they supposed to stand? I don't think they stood. I think you're supposed to stand, Betty. Lester.
I also want to share my deep gratitude to our sponsors and the individual donors who invest in this work. Let me say the mission of the Black Heritage Trail has always been important and crucial. However, as we've seen now and throughout history, we're at another moment where those in power seek to erase much of the progress that we're making as a country. So your financial support powers our nonprofit organization. If you have yet to make a gift this year, I'd encourage you to join us today. Your investment in the Black Heritage Trail helps shine a light on untold narratives, inspire connection and fellowship, fosters healing, and builds more inclusive communities. There's a short anonymous survey in your program booklet, or if you're on Zoom, there'll be a link in the chat. And as board president, I just want to thank you in advance for completing that survey. We use the summarized data for program evaluation as well as for fundraising efforts to continue to support programs like this. So please take your time to complete it. So those are my housekeeping items. And before I introduce our host, I hope you'll indulge me in a minute. I wanted to follow up on a thread from our last, that was raised in our last Tea Talk last week. And it's what I think about often. I think about hope. And there was a conversation, there was a question about how can we be hopeful in these times? And I want to tell a story that I think about often and try to relive this time in my life. In 2016, I had the great honor of driving around the late civil rights icon, Congressman John Lewis, while he was on a trip to New Hampshire. And I'll tell you, it was, aside from both of my 3 daughters, the marriage, my lovely wife, probably the highlight. In that order, because I know she's watching, so that's one. Gotta stay right with that. But I wanted to say, it took me a while, it took me about 2 hours before I had the courage to ask this question. And it was, Congressman Lewis, what makes you hopeful? We've come so far, but I feel that we still have so much further to go. And he paused and he said, Gene, you along with every young person and every other person. And then I heard him say something that if you followed Congressman Lewis, you probably heard him say before. He said, each of us has a moral obligation to stand up, and speak out. When you see something that's not right, you must say something. You must do something. Democracy is not a state, it's an act. Each generation must do its part to help build what we call the beloved community, a nation in a world society at peace with itself. And so I think about how each generation we're called to build upon that and to help realize the beloved community. And so in closing, given the theme is Black Preacher as Orator, I thought I'd leave us with a well-known Dr. King quote. As I was researching this, I realized that he actually said this on February 6th, 1968, nearly 58 years ago to the day. And he said, "We must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope." While there's so much disappointment and heartbreak in the world today, I pray that gatherings like this brighten our light and strengthen our hopeful resolve that we may continue to fight for love and peace in our days. Now I'd like to introduce our host, Angel Simone, an empowering public speaker and global executive from Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Thank you so much.
Oh, right, it's nice to see you all, just as an FYI.
Hear you.
Oh, interesting. This is better. Hey, friends. There you go. Angel Simone. I was saying, just so you know, I am from England. So my A's and my I's and my O's are going to sound slightly different to those behind me, but we're here for it. And I love being here. It's an honor to be invited to share. And so when I think about the Black preacher as orator, the Black preacher has long occupied a role that extends far beyond the pulpit. While serving as a religious leader, the Black preacher has historically functioned as a political voice, cultural transmitter, community organizer, and master rhetorician. In Black communities shaped by enslavement, segregation, and systemic oppression, the preacher emerged not only as a spiritual guide, but also as one of the most visible and influential public intellectuals. Through oratory that blends theology, storytelling, music, and moral argument, Black preachers have shaped collective identity and mobilized communities towards social change. Historically, the Black church was one of the few institutions fully controlled by African Americans. Within this space, preachers developed authority that was both spiritual and social. During slavery, enslaved preachers used coded language and biblical narratives to communicate hope, resistance, and the promise of liberation. Their sermons often carried double meanings, offering spiritual encouragement while subtly critiquing oppression, inspiring their congregations while navigating surveillance and punishment. As political voices, Black preachers have been central to movements for justice and civil rights. Figures such as Martin Luther King Jr. used sermons not merely to interpret scripture, but to confront racism, economic injustice, and violence. The pulpit became a platform for political education and moral persuasion. Unlike conventional politicians, Black preachers grounded their arguments in religious ethics, framing civil rights as a moral imperative rather than a partisan issue. Their oratory fused prophetic denunciation with hopeful vision, urging listeners to see social justice as an expression of faith. Beyond politics, Black preachers have served as cultural transmitters, preserving and passing down African American history, values, and traditions using oral storytelling. This oral tradition reinforces communal bonds and affirms cultural identity in the face of marginalization. Through language rich with metaphor, rhythm, and repetition, preachers transform sermons into shared cultural experiences that educate as much as they inspire. Community organization has also been a defining aspect of the Black preacher's role. Churches often function as meeting spaces, schools, and centers for mutual aid. Preachers organize boycotts, voter registration drives, and social programs, using their credibility to mobilize collective action. Their oratorical skill was essential to this work. Effective speeches could rally participation, sustain morale, and articulate clear goals. In moments of crisis, the preacher's voice provided direction and reassurance, reinforcing the idea that faith and action were inseparable. In sum, the Black preacher as orator occupies a unique and powerful position in American history. using oratory to galvanize social change, shaping political movements, preserving cultural heritage, and organizing communities. Their voices have spoken hope into despair, resistance into silence, and vision into uncertainty. Understanding the Black preacher as an orator is essential to understanding the broader struggle for dignity, justice, and self-definition within the African American life. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce our special guest, Bishop Michael Curry. Hold, please. To introduce our special, and again to introduce our special guest, Bishop Michael Curry is New Hampshire Episcopal Bishop of the Diocese of New Hampshire from Bristol.
Good afternoon. It's just so marvelous to see so many new faces, familiar faces from all over New Hampshire and the region, and it is a huge honor to make this introduction. I had the amazing privilege and honor to serve in the House of Bishops with Michael Curry as my presiding bishop. I remember the day in Salt Lake City when he was elected from the House of Bishops. It felt really like the mighty hand of God who just swept through our gathering and chose him through that in that day. As I was contemplating, there's a couple things I just want to say. You know, we need to thank God that the Buffalo Bills did not win the Super Bowl. Because I think it would be hard for him to have made it here, have that happen. I'm gonna just make one other, lame football analogy. One thing that Michael Curry has done for the Episcopal Church, and for me in particular, there's a story of the legendary football coach Vince Lombardi, who is coaching the Green Bay Packers. Hanging there, and they're just getting absolutely slaughtered by the Vikings or something, and it's halftime, and it's a double-digit loss so far, and he's notorious for an awful temper and using all sorts of colorful language and to just really be quite verbally abusive to his players. And they come in humbled and exhausted at halftime, and he comes in and holds a football and he says, "Gentlemen, let's return to some basics. This is a football." And it kind of changed their attitude, it recalibrated themselves. And I know it's lame, but Michael Curry brought back to the Episcopal Church the main thing and the main person, who was Jesus. It came across in his preaching, in his being, the depths of his prayers, his transparency. Suddenly, we were not talking about, can there be a teleological suspension of the ethical? And you're talking about Jesus, a friend, a brother, a leader, a shepherd, a redeemer. It changed everything for me. You and I, and there's someone else I know, graduated, at least two other priests here, graduated from the same seminary, Berkeley Divinity School at Yale. We were taught that a sermon, that the rhetorical structure of a sermon should be essentially 3 points, 3 theological points, and you end it with a quote from T.S. Eliot. And that was the Anglican way of doing a sermon. I've come to think, after Michael Curry doesn't preach that way, you haven't, yes. He preaches about his relationship with Jesus. and how he has come to know Jesus in the lives of the poor, the outcast, the downtrodden, the rejected, the humiliated. His pastoral heart has been the source of all of his words. He preaches from heart to heart, from full heart to empty heart to broken heart, and there we discover redemption and hope and hope. I wondered after my time as bishop, as a bishop in the House of Bishops with Michael, to hear him preach, and every time it is like the waters of redemption washing over me. If that way of learning how to preach, the 3 points with some basis in some theologian, usually white, usually Western European, quoting Auden or Eliot, was really a way of enforcing white supremacy even upon this white guy. And suddenly, when I experience Michael preaching, I am allowed, because he is allowed, to be himself, to share the authentic story of God's passion for each of us and for this broken world. Thank you, Michael, for that, teaching me how to preach. And I can never preach like you, but you taught me how to preach like me. Yes, I'm doing okay. So thank you, Michael. Let me pray.
Well, I don't want to be morbid or anything, but let me sign you up for the funeral eulogy now. I just have to say that, serving with Rob Hirschfeld in the House of, he is a poet, a real poet with what some have called the poetic imagination. To be able to look through the present and give voice to both the agony and the possibilities that are implicit there. I don't have that. It's not my gift. That's yours, brother. And I covet it so much. You have no idea. Just like I want his voice. I was supposed to get Rev's voice, and God gave it to him. And but I have just enjoyed and been blessed by you. And I know this diocese, the Diocese of New Hampshire, has been likewise blessed.
Yeah.
Yeah, that injured bird. And
It's an awesome mother here.
it's funny, I know. But it's, and Rob is really humble. He's not an arrogant person. I wouldn't mind being mad, but he's not arrogant. He's not. And when he speaks, he's like, yeah, but people listen. And thank you, brother. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you all for inviting me to share this time and be in conversation with Angel. And I asked her, please be nice, ask nice questions, easy questions. And then she sent us a list of some possibilities. I said, oh my God. But it really is. It's just a blessing. And I thank God for you because it may be that you have gathered here and others are gathering around our country in particular, as it says in the book of Esther, for such a time as this. And I'm not Mordecai, but if I was, I would say perhaps you were called. Perhaps we have been called to bear witness to the love of God, to the way of justice, to the power of the truth for such a time as this. None of us would have chosen it, but here we are. And we have been called, summoned for such a time as this. Lift up your heads, straighten your backs and walk. Because it's a long way to Zion. Walk. Well, I would say a few things and then we'll get in conversation. I am, my wife has accused me of being, an incurable optimist, and then probably right, because I think she understands now after 47 or 48 years of marriage. I hope she's not watching right now, but 47 or 48 years, I don't know. That, I've been a Buffalo Bills fan since they were the old AFL, 61, somewhere thereabouts. And I've been through it all and been through at least 4 Super Bowls, which gives us a record. And when I was a parish priest in Baltimore, I thought it was my job, in addition to at the offertory time, to make announcements, but also to make sure that the city of the Baltimore Ravens was aware that there was another team. And so when they lost that last Super Bowl, a parishioner called me up and said, I just wanted to call to express my condolences. I said, yeah, I believe that. And he said, but something has occurred. And I said, well, what's that? He said, well, I figured out what BILLS stands for. It's an acronym. And each letter, aims in a word. It's a word. And I said, okay, I'll write, what is the acronym? BILLS actually is an acronym that stands for Boy, I Love Losing Super Bowl. I said, I can't wait to preach your funeral. So my wife may be right. I may be an incurable optimist, or I think enough of my grandmother's grandson that her spirit, which could not be beaten down, in a life far more difficult than mine has ever been or ever will be. My maternal grandmother was a sharecropper's daughter and granddaughter of enslaved folk in the eastern part of North Carolina. And she was just a remarkable woman who, again, grew up in eastern North Carolina, which is the most rural part, even today, of the state. And I don't know, I really don't know if she finished high school or not. That I'm not sure. She probably did. But she grew up believing in the power of education to be the most critical power of emancipation. And she was passionate about that. And she was determined that her children would get whatever education was possible, and that they would get the education that she didn't get. And she, as I said, she may have graduated high school, that I'm really not absolutely sure of. But she was a passionate follower. She loved Jesus. I remember my daddy used to tease her. He said, look, Jesus probably runs and hides every time he sees you coming in. And we joked that it's like Jesus lived next door. She talked about it somebody. That was his grandma. And she loved going to church. She was a dyed-in-the-wool Rockford Baptist. She wasn't Episcopalian. She never quite understood Episcopalian. She said, how y'all know when somebody gets the Holy Ghost? She said, in my church, something happens. In your church, y'all just kind of sit there and go like this. And then she I think lost 2 children in childbirth. But again, this is in the 20s, early 20s. And that was not uncommon. I mean, childbirth is still dangerous. There's a blessing coming, but it's still dangerous and vulnerable, profoundly vulnerable. And thank God for the folk who make it safe and the research that makes it safe. But she lost two children, I know, and those are the two I'm aware of. And had three surviving children, two uncles and my mother. And both of the uncles went off the Second World War. And they came back. They didn't come back. And she, again, this same woman, sharecropper's daughter, who did not have, or maybe didn't have, the fullness of a high school education, made sure that both of those boys completed theirs. One was a police officer until he retired, and the other taught economics at several historically Black colleges until he retired. And my mother, her one daughter, became a mathematician. And at one time was at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. I don't remember what she was doing, but I think she was with women, the Black women that used to do the computer stuff. She was one of those there. Yeah. And later taught high school and tertiary college. And these three folk from a sharecropper's daughter who may or may not have graduated from high school, because she had a vision and a conviction that God didn't put us here on this earth to be stepped on or to step on anyone else. That we were put here for a purpose, to make a difference, and to do it together. That we were not just born, we were called. And so she would preach before we went to school every year. And she would always, I know the words, I can hear her and my Aunt Lillian, both of them, her sister, both of them saying, get your education. Get your education. Because if it's in your mind, nobody can take it away from you. This from a young girl who saw the joy of Reconstruction after the Civil War, saw newly freed slaves suddenly able to eke out a living and to build something. And then they saw that hope and something taken away. Put it night riders. In North Carolina, which I love, I still live in North Carolina. I love North Carolina. But in Wilmington, North Carolina, in Reconstruction, when there was hope, or maybe e pluribus unum could be more than just a quaint Latin phrase we play with periodically in this country, that it might actually mean from many diverse people, one nation, indivisible, under God, with liberty and justice, not just for some, but for all. That it might really mean that. And it was actually true in Wilmington, North Carolina. There was a multiracial, after emancipation, a multiracial city council, a Black mayor, and literally that government was overthrown. A coup d'etat in the United States. And there were other towns very similar. She lived to see the hope and the dream of freedom dashed on the altar of reality. And yet this same woman, and I'm gonna sit down now. Y'all know on a microphone is it's a terrible thing to waste. I mean, she saw that moment of hope and saw that hope die. And she refused to give it up eternally. And she would say, if it's in your head, nobody can take it away from you. So get your education and then do something. Do something beyond self. Do something. And she infused in us a hope that if we did our part and others do their part, that we can climb this mountain and we can be a light shining on a hill. I refuse to give up that hope and belief that this nation can be a shining city on a hill. That once again, somehow, the world will look at us and say, this nation has helped to teach liberty and justice and kindness and goodness. That once again, someday. So don't you give up. My grandma used to say, walk together, children. And don't you get weary. Because there's a great camp meeting in the promised land. But we go home now. We
Testing. Testing.
Speak your, I can skip on us.
With spirit, baby.
Do one, two.
Just have. Excuse me.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Awesome.
Louder.
Thank you all. Well, I had a wonderful 30 minutes of just chatting and preaching, and I'm not sure what we're still doing here, but let's have a conversation. But we keep talking about. I like those flowers. We keep talking about the Black preacher, Bishop Curry, and in your opinion, how does the role of the Black preacher differ from that of other religious leaders or other communities or traditions?
other religious leaders in this context or in the.
Whatever context you would have.
Well, I think, I mean, I have to say that I do think, the role of the Black preacher today is changing dramatically. Because culture's changed, man. When I was serving in Baltimore, Maryland, I went there in eighth grade now, and was there until 2000. I was there when crack cocaine hit the city streets about mid-80s, somewhere thereabouts. And arrived at St. James Church there, which was actually, if you remember The Wire, I mean, some episodes were filmed actually at St. James, when they showed the groups. Anyway, that arrived, it was during drive-by shooting and all of that. The role of Black preachers did rise up again. But it clearly took more than just preachers. And I could see that role beginning to change more as a collaborative. I mean, you really needed the medical community. You really needed the educational community. You really needed the legal community. You really you began to realize, it's gonna take more sophistication than just preaching. It's gonna take all of that. It's going to need those preachers, because God has inspired the prophetic imagination. But you need folk who are gonna take it and walk with it and go further, because the reality was the damage was so deep. It really was. It was the first time I saw clearly that we were losing generations of children. That we actually believed in. And that I remember telling the congregation, probably in the late 80s, early 90s, this may be the first generation of Black children growing up who are not growing up in the womb of the church. And I used to remind the congregation, either you help them learn to deal before the Lord, or you will kneel before them. Well, and it will not be pretty. And I said, so we've got to help. And so we embarked on working with the children and a lot came out of that. But it was the first time, it was a turning point for me personally. That I think I was seeing what was happening. And the role of the preacher was not the dominant leader. That role could go to a lot of different folks, it just depended on who they were. And I think that's true even now. And so it's much more the effective pastors and preachers and leaders are those who know how to mobilize both. Their great oratorical gifts are put to their greatest use in organizing and sometimes inspiring in the background. Sometimes inspiring in the background. There was one moment when Barack Obama was at Mother Emanuel Church in 2015 after the killing in Mother Emanuel. And at one point, he had clearly practiced. He broke out and sang Amazing Grace. Nobody remembers what he said. That was a moment, you see me said that was the spiritual moment of contact and connection with God who can help us get over. That was a preaching moment by a layperson, a lawyer. And that's what's changed. It's a much more diverse leadership reality today. And the effective preachers are ones who learn how to help to organize, inspire, and who, like Howard Thurman, who was really a spiritual director to the civil rights leadership for years. And people don't, it's not known. And it actually was. Now, Black clergy are shifting gears, both preachers. You got to preach if you want to eat. And my dad grew up Baptist and became an Episcopal preacher. And he said, because I wanted to eat. And so yeah, I am worried. But it takes a diverse set of gifts and possibilities. And I remember Dr. Marcus Garvey Wood was the pastor of Providence Baptist Church in Baltimore, which was a couple blocks down. And he and Dr. King were roommates at Crozier Seminary. And Dr. Wood was just the quietest. I mean, he was the opposite of what you would put him in a pulpit and he became a lion. But if you were sitting talking with him, he was just quiet and gentle. And he had the capacity. I saw an early vision of preachers as organizers and as spiritual directors. And that was his great capacity. I mean, you put him in a pulpit, he was going to preach. But he could organize folk and bring them together and bring out the gifts and the capacities that were needed and then inspire them as much as himself. And so I think it's much more diverse, believe it or not. And the historic Black church is aging. I mean, it's the church is aging. It's having some revival here and there. There's some large mega churches and there's some, but there's a big change coming. Well, that's another opportunity. That's another opportunity because, you know, in the Christian church, I mean, folk hang on till 90, 95, which can be old. And the truth is, activists in the church don't quit. I've seen they don't quit. I'm looking at y'all, they don't quit. And that's a capacity and a gift that will move us to go even in hopeless times. I think I answered the question.
Wonderful. Okay, I love the fact.
You okay?
Oh, no. Speak more now.
Okay.
It's not out.
There we go.
Hello.
Thanks for those thoughts, and I love how you talked about the role of the preacher having changed and requiring community. And I love the point you said about, well, children are not growing up in the womb of the church. But the reality is our children are growing up with a lot of social media.
Yeah.
So how have you seen social media impact the role of the preacher? And how can the preacher reconcile the power of social media today and still impact community in the way it did in the past?
We have a group discussion of that. Well, you know, I mean, I have to admit, I'm not sure. I mean, I to be very honest, I'm not sure. It was interesting when I was in North Carolina. I did get on social media and intentionally did, but I don't know that I've actually reached younger generations. I mean, I kind of got on Facebook when young people were getting off Facebook because their parents and grandparents were getting on Facebook. And somebody said, you know, it's sort of like a party. If you're at a party with other young people and your grandmother and her friends show up, you're gonna leave and go to another party. And that sort of happened with Facebook. And so they migrated to other venues now. And I do think there's something there. I haven't done it, so I really can't speak to it, except that I've seen clergy around the church who are engaging, and they actually are engaging in not just TikTok, but in all of the various means, and they're reaching something. I do know this: God is not finished with emerging generations. And God has not given up on them. Sometimes our organized religious institutions, we give up on them if they won't come to us and do it our way. Right? And the truth is, we got to go where they are and help them together with us encounter that living God, loving, liberating, and life-giving God. Just like we did, but to do it it's gonna be their way, not ours. It's gonna be the same thing. And that is happening. No, actually, that is happening. I've seen that. I just know that that's not me. I'm not that, I mean, I'm their grandpa. And there are times when they do want to stick around. There really are. But those are quiet times. Those were kind of like Nicodemus, a story in John's Gospel where Nicodemus comes to Jesus at night. Because he didn't want others in the Sanhedrin and the political establishment. He wanted them to know that he was curious about what they thought. And I used to joke that Nicodemus was the first Episcopalian. I've never seen an Episcopalian who wanted to get close to Jesus but didn't want to do it when anybody was looking. And I have a feeling more and more young people are like that. More and more. And so Jesus didn't rebuff them. He sat in conversation with them. And they're looking. They're looking because they're hungry. I would put the deepest of hunger. Deepest of deepest of hunger. It is deep and real in our young. It is. And we want to talk. But they all talk too all the time. You want to talk. We're gonna share this fairly.
So it talks about the Black church being the center of political and social leadership, and Black preachers being a cultural transmitter, passing down African American history, etc. How do we see that happening in modern times? Well, it's getting harder and harder to group folk together in one place. It's getting harder and harder. Even when I speak to my children, they lack knowledge of history? How does the Black preacher continue that role? Or is that even still their role today?
You know, actually, that is where, the Black Freeze, where the organized church does have a possibility of having a footprint making a difference. Because that's where, again, you sort of have to sometimes break the mold, like, for example, in after-school programs, especially in community, where children, I mean, one of the things we discovered and realized is that a lot of the young people who were in the community of our church, of where we were home and parents weren't necessarily home with them. And so it finally, I mean, it dawned on us, why don't we create the family room in the church? And we were able to get funding for dinner programs so that basically, because the Justice Department, at least at that time, was funding that because they said the hours when young people get in legal trouble are from the time they leave school to about 9 o'clock at night. When they are completely unsupervised, they're not. So we said, well, let's create the living room. So we did. We called it, but that's what we basically did from roughly the time kids got out of school, about 8 o'clock, somewhere thereabouts, and then the kids would go home. And it was during those times it was important for me and for the other clergy who were part of it to be a part of that. And to spend time, they were gonna have a little time with Father, have a little time with Mother. And so, I mean, it got so bad because they kind of knew they knew my routine, because I would ask, you know, who was such and such, did such and such. And somebody would say, well, it's either Jesus or Martin Luther King. I'm blown, y'all. But that time became critical, and I think it's still critical. It does mean you gotta get in volunteers. It takes some work to do that, but it's a critical that was the Justice Department funding that, because they knew that was a critical time when young people could get in trouble. And you could continue to work with them then, providing a family environment, not bemoaning that they don't have that. Provide it. You do what you know, feed them. Food is good. But human beings, who know where food is. And young people are just like they will, and they want family. This is a whole nother thing. One of the things that became clear to me, and I really didn't understand, it was during the drive-by time, and when I started to find myself burying young men who were involved in love, some of whom were heavy members of the church, but some did not. I realized they were looking for family. Don't misread what a gang is. Because it's yearning for deep kinship, and it's a misguided. I mean, but you can't throw it out. You got to help to transform it if you can. And the best way to do it is when they're young and raise them up. It can be done. That's pastoral leadership. That's the kind of leadership that not just the oratorial. It is the oratory of relationship. And that is transformative. It's hard, but it makes a difference. Amen.
Just shifting slightly, I was in a training recently, and I do a lot of training around diversity, equity, inclusion, and LGBTQ rights, etc. It got really tense, because as you know, that those topics have become very politicized, almost weaponized humans. And one of the things the Black preacher did, and I would love you to speak to this, is how to frame civil rights as a moral issue rather than a partisan or political issue. And can you speak to that a little bit? Because I know I'm struggling with how to help people understand that this is not a political thing. It's a human thing.
Well, I can tell you a story. And I was Bishop of North Carolina for 15 years. And it was an interesting experience that I had always been the priest of historically Black congregations. And so I was pretty much in an environment, not completely, but pretty much in an environment in which everybody believed politically is pretty much on the same level. I mean, every once in a while, so different, but by and large, so you did, oh, okay, yeah, so it's that had been my life. Then I got elected, I was Bishop of North Carolina, and here I was, a black guy in a predominantly white diocese, predominantly. I mean, there were a number of black churches and black folk, Latino, so there's some diversity, but not a lot. And all of a sudden, I kind of realized, oh, wait a minute, do we share a common language? And I wasn't quite sure until stuff got real. And that's when the stuff got real. And I said, okay, how are we gonna work this? And I realized my spiritual director said, you got to be real in this moment. And you have to go be honest. Don't be diplomatic. Go and be honest. Been here long enough. And finally, I started lifting up those sides of the gospel. Will come unto me, all ye who are weary every day. All. Enemies, all. Or we say in North Carolina, all y'all. Come unto me, all y'all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Learn from me, for I am gentle, lowly, and I'll help you find rest for your souls. Anyway, I'm not preaching, I'm not supposed to preach, but that kind of thing, the more I talk about that, I say, God made us all. Whoever we are, however we got here, whatever we're like, that's who we are. And it was okay if I was talking about race. It got hot when we talk about human sexuality. I want to thank the Diocese of New Hampshire for electing my friend Gene Robinson, just like my friend John Churchill. Because it got hot in North Carolina for a while. But we kept it real and engaged in conversation and didn't run away from each other and didn't judge each other. And I'm here to tell you, I've seen churches in North Carolina who, we're in church. I don't want to, well, I was gonna say, it gave me hell. And gave the church hell and held back money. That hurts. I hadn't run into that before. I said, oh Lord, I'm just be everybody loving me. But anyway, held back money for a little while. Because we didn't run away. Yeah. Didn't run away. So I'm gonna love you anyway, even though lose my religion. But we're not gonna quit. We're gonna keep on. And I can actually name the church like we're there. Where same-sex couples are blessed now, no even back now. Where I think everybody's welcome. You want to come to find Jesus? Come on. That, don't run away. Love folk anyway. Hear where they are and invite them to hear where you are. And let's figure out what the gospel's saying to us all. That's what I think, not my bias, not my opinion. What is the gospel saying? And I can honestly say that North Carolina, Sam Robin, the bishop there now, has not having to do with that. Here's other thing. Human beings are very creative with sin. We can create new ones actually. And so we can't, that's why I am an optimist. No. I am hopeful because we do have a God. And God is not finished with us yet. I remember when I was in Baltimore again, when I would go into Sinai Hospital and above the obstetrics unit where the quote from the Talmud, every child who is born is a sign that God has not given up on the work. I never every child. If that's true, then don't give up until God gives up. God has not given up. And we have not given up either because our time is running out. Okay, I stopped. That's one way to get a freaking stop.
Thank you so much, and, this was amazing. Who am I handing over to now?
It's time for Q and A. So we usually do some agreement that we really wanted to give you guys an opportunity to ask any questions you want to ask. So with the time we have left, the floor is yours. Anybody have questions? Please raise your hands and we'll get to them.
I'll end on.
We have one.
Oh, we have one over here, Quincy.
Start some better.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks for being here. My name is Kevin Stepfer. Fairly new here, but I do a lot of work with BLM, Black Lives Matter. And I want to pick up on something that I think you guys have both talked about briefly, which was about framing civil rights as a moral issue. And I'd like to hear a little bit more about that because I'm actually wondering if maybe that might be part of the problem. Because that being a moral issue almost assumes that we're all working with a similar moral compass. And so I want to know, what do you think about how we get back to a level playing field in the sense of restoring that moral compass so that we can have that type of discussion?
No, but you know what? I can tell you that. When I was in North Carolina, Bishop William Barber began Moral Monday, which this was when a lot of crazy legislation was coming out in the state legislature. I mean, just a lot of mean stuff. I mean, anyway, and so the Moral Monday movement started. I don't remember the year now, but when that started, and Ann Hodges Koppel was Bishop Suffman and we tried to figure out people were getting involved and getting arrested. And Episcopalians were getting arrested and, some. And we had to figure out how do we, enable our church to be a participant in what was clearly a moral movement. Because some of the legislation was just mean-spirited. And that's not who we are. That's not us. And so, we began to speak, in the language of the spiritual that is truly moral. Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Love your enemies. Pray for those who curse you. Do good to those who harm you. I mean, we went right to the core of the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth. And at that core, there is a deep moral core that it's hard to argue with. Now, he got crucified over that. I understand that. But, so, there's always the fixed bag. Get on with that. But it called us to some common ground that actually made it possible for folk who might not be too comfortable with Bishop Barber and folk getting arrested. But actually, they had moved to a point where they said, I remember, it was the former member of the state Supreme Court said to me, they're attempting to change the constitution of the state.
Yeah.
To take away rights, which you never do in a constitution. And this was a Republican former member of the Supreme Court who was retired. But he saw that was a moral principle about what a constitution is supposed to do. If you help folks find that moral point, there may be some agreement, even though they might not agree with everything. That actually made a difference to translate what sounded like a political agenda into a moral one. Do unto others, you would have them do unto you. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. Police officers, law enforcement officers, we need you to be good Samaritans. Let me tell you about a parable about good Samaritans. That's what we need for, see what I mean? That's taking something that sounds like it's political and transforming it into something deeply spiritual and moral, where we say we agree with that and invite folk to really too. And that takes hard work and conversation and relationship. But for most people can get there. A side note, in immigration right now, God bless the folk of Minneapolis. God bless them. And God bless that little boy with that hat. Lord have mercy. That child standing there touched something deeper than just our usual politics. Who's going to stand here and put that child, kick that child out of this country? Who? Well, yeah, but most people are not going to be there. Have you looked at those polls?
Yeah.
Something shifted because the face of a child is touching something deep where where humanity does still dwell. And when that happens, then it's possible for moral change to happen within us. And it's hard, it's not easy, but that's the change from just from merely political to what is moral and spiritual. So that there's plenty good room for all of us. Thank you.
That was a great question.
Hello. Hey, Angel. My name is Sarah Brown. I have a question for the bishop about, for lack of a better word, the nefarious powers of the church in this situation that we're in right now, because I have a number of friends and they are close friends and I love them and they are good people. I mean, I'm sure we all have people like this. Two of them are African American, and all three of them, and I've got more than three, but these are three sort of big examples. They actually use religion and their faith as the force behind their right-wing, views. And they just seem to be more and more shored up. And then along that same note, I mean, this is very naive, but my daughter recently took her boyfriend who was visiting from far away to a mega church in Brooklyn. And she had been watching people go in and out of there for, weeks and weeks, and was like, I want to get in there. It's all immigrants, mostly African American and Latino. And they went in all excited and they sat down, and that was a right-wing experience. And the church and the preachers were white. And the church was filled with hundreds and hundreds of people of color. And so, it's a force. Most of my friends that are right-wing, that are Trump supporting people, a lot of them are religious. And they're using their religion as justification.
Yeah. What would you like Angel to define?
I mean, the question is, how do you and how do you combat that, or how do we? I mean, what do we do with that? Like,
I do. I mean, you are absolutely. You're naming a real. That's real. That's real.
Yeah.
I really do believe that the essence of religious faith is found in the words and the teachings of Moses that Jesus quoted. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind and strength. And you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I believe that is the moral ground that we can stand on with integrity And that is the invitation that folk in this room can bear witness to. And it won't always get a happy thank you for being that. But I'm here to tell you there will be more resonance in that message and that witness than we expect. But that's the hard core reality that Jesus of Nazareth was willing to sacrifice his life for. And to invite folk into that kind of Christianity. I preached at a wedding a while back. Nice little family affair. And it was really fun. After that, when I came home, I can't tell you how many times I met folk and was in conversation with people on airplanes and all sorts who said, I didn't know Christianity was about love. That was, and they weren't all non-church people, you know what I mean, non-religious people. A lot were. And I don't know where, I don't know, I'm not even gonna try to do the sociology of that. But what I do know is that if more of us seek to live our lives defined and determined by the way of unselfish, sacrificial love that seeks the good and the well-being of others as well as ourselves. And if we're committed to that and dare to live it, and when we mess it up, because we do mess up, we're human. When you mess up, fess up, and then get up. And to keep on, I'm calling it loving. I'm telling you, as a witness, there's so much power in that. I was bishop of a wonderful diocese. I mean, North Carolina was one, and North Carolina is mid-state. So it was one of the last ones to join the Confederacy. And the Bishop of North Carolina really didn't want to withdraw. There's Civil War, a pre-Civil War. And so it's always been mid-state, and it's a mix. It really is a political mix today. That message and that reality moved, at least with this comparison, from a period of real conflict about who was going to be in and who was going to be out of the church. This was after Bishop Robinson's election and consecration, all of that. Moved from that point to saying, we're going to be a church that's going to be kind and just because we're going to take love serious. And I never got one upset letter when William Barber was getting arrested. In fact, there were so many Episcopalians getting arrested that I actually started thinking, we could actually decide who we really would like to offer. You got some folk we'd like you to arrest. Not one letter. Not one letter when we stood, and that was, I don't think it had nothing to do with Michael Kirk. I know that. But I do believe when we lifted up the banner of love, that is what Jesus was about. And that is what this faith is about. I'm telling you, I just believe that I was trying to think, but the image I came to, I said, it's like fly paper, but that doesn't. It's just a magnet. And some of our friends who are enamored by megachurch and all of that will discover that maybe love is the greatest thing that I need and want. And maybe there's another way. And that Christianity really is about that. And I just believe, keep loving, for real. But Micah say, what does the Lord require of you? And justice, love, mercy, all humbly with your God. That's our witness. and don't give it up. I don't think I fully answered your question, but we keep on trying. Okay.
So, Bishop Curry,
Where-
here, I just have, since you just mentioned the wedding, I just have to ask you a question. From the son of a sharecropper to preaching a love to royalties, what was that like for you?
It was weird. It was really, you know, the funny thing was, I knew I was in different cultures. Because originally the talk was supposed to be, they call it an address, not a sermon. I don't know what that means, but anyway, originally it was supposed to be 3 minutes. And God bless the Archbishop of Canterbury, he said, look, you know, my career is not going to talk for 3 minutes. So they got, I think they agreed on 8 or 10 minutes, I've read something. So once we got over that hurdle, what I realized was people weren't used to reacting. Americans there is a revivalist tradition in American religion, all the religions. So that there can be a responsiveness if permission is given. And that's not there necessarily. So what I discovered was, it wasn't that they weren't folk in the congregation, they were listening. And it was in the reception that folk came alive and actually talked and wanted to talk. And I said, okay, this is just a different way of, it's just a different, everybody, okay, you're from Radio Original. Did you say that? Yeah, it's just a different, they're not used to reacting in church. I mean, and the royal family has to, like, as much as they can, not react, because if they react, it gets in the press. And, it gets complicated. It's complicated. But folk did want to talk just like normal folk going to church. And the truth is, people are people. And when you get down and get real, people are people. And so is the royal family.
So I think we have time for one last question. Hand up.
Hello, thank you very much. I was wondering, it's difficult to try and pull Christians together, especially in light of Christian white supremacy and other misuses of basic Christianity. But I keep wondering, has there been any effort, and I haven't heard you speak to it, or do you think there could be an effort to start trying to pull faiths together across the spectrum? Buddhists, Hindus, Baha'i, Jewish religion. I don't see an ecumenical effort going on. Do you think there could be one?
You mean,
For the moral battles that we're facing, whether it's civil rights, which used to be a little bit more ecumenical, or immigration rights, or the people's rights, as saying democracy. And in an organized fashion, a leader speaking out? Thank you.
The answer is yes, sort of. But I'm not sure how organized it really is. I'm looking at this virtual a little bit. I've been retired 6 months, so I'm out of it. But for example, there are some ecumenical coalitions and interfaith coalitions that are active and are working together, but they don't hit the headlines. I mean, that's the reality. They don't hit the headlines unless something dramatic happens that they're involved in. And then because I know we were involved in both ecumenical and interfaith work that often was speaking to these issues and working, and we would go to Capitol Hill together. I mean, we actually have done all that, and a lot of that's still going on. But it doesn't hit the headlines, and it's not glitzy. And I'm not, condemning the media or anything like that. I'm just saying, unless something dramatic happens that gets public attention, It's not, no. We need it more. If we need it more, but it's gonna take more and more and more, both interfaith as well as ecumenical, within the Christian group itself, and Christians, Jews, Muslims, Buddhists, all of us working together. And there may be some going on here that I put just Birchville on the spot.
Thank you. I'll try to answer that briefly. There has been, and this picks up on the name phenomenon of the evangelical right, the right-wing churches, who, I will say it, I know this is, I have to be careful of saying something and then suddenly there's a cell phone and
This is being recorded.
whom are we worshiping?
Yes.
Whom are we worshiping? Are we worshiping a God who we heard in the Episcopal Church today, the lesson from Isaiah? What kind of fast does the Lord require? But to break the yoke of those who are oppressed, to clothe the naked, to feed the hungry, to bring hope to the hopeless, to become even weak? Or are we worshiping a God who is a God of force and control and violence? That's who we're choosing. We believe in a God who could do that, but who has chosen not to. And that's, I'm in the wrong place to be preaching that, but that's who we are. It's the lesson of Micah that you've just quoted. What does the Lord require of us? To do justice, to love mercy and kindness. The blowback we got from a fellow bishop a year ago, just with the word mercy. And what you're saying, engaging all of our prophetic imagination, which means to me, to see a different world. That's what we're doing. The ecumenical interfaith community has been underground. It's been forced underground. It is not public. It feels like it's in communities like this. It's in conversations that are taking place after this event. And it's one by one, neighborhood by neighborhood. And we're seeing something.
Yes.
And I credit your tenacity for helping me be converted to that, where I have wanted to give up hope. Michael, you have really inspired me to, what did you say before? Lift up your head, stiffen your back. We have a walk.
Yes.
We have a walk ahead of us. So, thank you. I am here now to thank you all and to pray that, and to encourage us to raise our heads, lift up our heads, stiffen our backs, keep walking together. I also want to thank all the volunteers that were a part of making this happen. Sharon Jones, who is the helper, the shepherd of our shepherd. Thank you, Sharon, for bringing Michael up here, and thanks for coming. Sponsors that we've had, I'll just say it, the Episcopal Church of Hampshire. The Wentworth Douglas Hospital, Sheehan Feeney, that's a law firm, right? Yeah. I'm gonna repeat a joke that you told me, and it says, when you were a parish priest, you were spending most of your time, as we do, with funeral directors. Because that's just part of the pastoral ministry. You became a bishop, you spent a lot of time more with lawyers. And you told us who you preferred to work with, but we're thankful for Sheehan Feeney Law Firm. Thank you. Thank you. St. John's Church. Shaheen and Gordon, another law firm. Thank you. St. George's Church in Durham, the New Hampshire Center for Justice and Equity. Thank you. And the New Hampshire New Hampshire Humanities, and Melanie Levesque. Thank you for all of your support. Volunteers to name: Shelley Hart, who spoke. This is her house. Thank you to Jordan and Philadelphia. Diane Stradling, Ewer Sheet, Karen Jacoby, Sarah Shellman, and Tim DeLea. Thank you for all of these. Right. The next tea talk I'm to announce is the 15th, a week from today, at 2:00 at the Portsmouth Public Library. And the theme for that is titled Unbought and Unbossed, Black Female Oratory. And it'll be featuring the Reverend Irene Monroe, Ebony J.J. Curry, no relation, I don't think, and Sandy Clark Addy. So please come, arrange your schedules for that. Thank you. Continue to do justice, love, mercy, kindness, and walk humbly before your God in the full strength of God's love. Thank you.